Hello and welcome to Spread Book Joy. Today I'm going to give you a reading update and a small channel update. If you're new to the channel, I'm Jack. I'm a qualified primary school teacher who shares and reviews great books for children for home or school, but also adults, and that's kind of one of the changes I want to talk to you a little bit about with my channel. So going forward, I'm going to be still reviewing books for children because that's what my blog is about, and that's the thing that started me off on this journey, was the fact that I'd like to share great children's literature for people who are supporting children to become readers. That's kind of like my whole, if you check my booktuber newbie video, which I'll link, put a card up for you so you can check that out. That's the whole reason I started Spread Book Joy in the first place. I'm still going to carry on doing that, but I'm doing one video a week at the moment, and mostly they're review videos, but occasionally I want to do different videos, and I'd like to start doing more. I find that the ones that are more popular are when I talk about my reading for the month or a book list or a tag, and actually they're things that I really enjoy doing, and I really enjoy talking about my personal reading as well as the children's books that I read. So this channel is just going to encompass all of my reading from now on, and I'm going to still post reviews of books, but my reviews tend to be sort of top-down reviews of the books because it's quicker for me to set up than trying to find time to sit down and film and make myself feel like I'm presentable to be on camera and things like that. So, because who wants to be on camera if they're not feeling like, presentable? I don't, certainly. So I want to film more top-down reviews, which I will post midweek on a Wednesday, and then on Saturdays I'm going to reserve for this type of video, so TBRs, tags and a reading update, and that's going to include all my reading and encompass all of my reading, because that might be what people find enjoyable. And actually I love watching people's reading updates, monthly wrap-ups, hauls, those kinds of videos. I really enjoy them, so why not make them myself? So that's what I'm going to be doing going forward. Today I'm going to talk about the books that I read in the month of April, so it's going to be an April wrap-up. I'm not always going to do a monthly wrap-up. Some months I read more than others, some months I don't read very much at all. I'm just going to do regular wrap-up videos, or reading update videos, I suppose I should call them. And it's not just going to be, like I said, not just children's books, so I'm just going to talk to you about everything that I read in the month of April. I read 11 books in April, so I'm not going to talk in depth about them all, and some of them I've already done review videos for, so I won't talk in depth particularly about the ones that I've reviewed, but I'll just tell you a bit about the book and whether I liked it, what I enjoyed about it, that kind of thing. So the first book that I read in April, or I started it in March but I finished it in April, was The Thursday Murder Club, which I've been seeing absolutely everywhere on BookTube and on Bookstagram, and for good reason. I absolutely loved it. So the premise is it's set in an old people's retirement community in England, in Kent, and the residents get together and form the Thursday Murder Club. They're I don't know if one's an ex police officer or spy of some kind, but they get together and they look over cold cases and they try and solve these murders, and then a murder happens within their midst. And it's told from several points of view. One first person point of view from a new resident, a new member of the Thursday Murder Club, and then several other sort of third person limited points of view from different characters. And it was just very funny. It's very English, it's very British humour, and I really, really enjoyed it. And I'm really looking forward to reading Richard Osman's next book in the series. I think it's a series. I think there's another book he's got out, and I think it's the same in this series. But I'd highly recommend it if you like sort of, cozy mystery style things. It's not really a cozy mystery though, so it's not that kind of mystery. But yeah, very funny, very well written, and it kept me guessing right till the end. I really didn't guess the plot at all, so really good. If you like crime, I'd definitely check it out. Next up, as part of the Bronte project, which is a year-long project run by Marissa from Blatantly Bookish, and I'll link her channel in the description box below. She's doing a full read, 12 months and a different book each month of the Brontes, and this month April was Agnes Grey, and I've never read any Anne Bronte, so I was really keen to take part in that one, and I really enjoyed it. Agnes is a governess in 19th century England, and Agnes Grey is kind of based apparently on Anne Bronte's experiences as a governess, and it's kind of a like warts and all revealing expose of what life is like to be a governess. But there are really good themes in it. It's sort of, governesses were in a really strange position in the 19th century because people wanted educated women of a particular class to be teaching their children. They didn't want anyone of sort of working class or servant class teaching their children because it wasn't they didn't perceive that they'd be the right kinds of people to work with their children, so they weren't part of the servants in the house, but equally they were never treated as equals with the family. So they're in a very odd position, and Agnes Grey talks about the difficulties and the trials and tribulations of a governess. Really, there is a partial love story in it, and I won't say too much because spoilers, even though some people are like, oh, you don't spoil a classic, but classics are books like any other, and if you never read it, I wouldn't have appreciated a spoiler. But I really enjoyed Agnes Grey, and I'm looking forward to next month, Tenant of Wildfell Hall. If you'd like to take part, there is a Goodreads group, and Marissa has opened up lots of chats so people can discuss the book on there. And I think they've already done Villette. I'm not sure what other ones they've done already, but the more famous Bronte books that most people have read, like I've only ever read Wuthering Heights and Jane Eyre, this is why I was really keen to take part in this read along, they're doing later on in the year. Next up, I read a fantasy classic, Roger Zelazny's Nine Princes in Amber. So this book my brother sent me, my lovely brother, my older brother, he sent me this book because we were having a discussion about the fact that I'd like to read some Roger Zelazny work, and he's a classic fantasy author who is beloved by Neil Gaiman and other sort of modern fantasy authors cite him as a real influence, someone that they absolutely love. And over here in the UK, the Chronicles of Amber are only available in one large edition, and there are like, I can't remember how many books, 10 books, maybe more, and they're only available in a big chunky thing, which I really didn't want to get. I don't like big heavy books, that's why I don't have many hardbacks, because I like to carry books around with me, and I like, I've got tiny skinny wrists, and holding out heavy books just is uncomfortable for me. So anyway, that's by the by. But I really wanted to get a copy of this, and my brother found a second-hand copy of the first book, and yeah, I enjoyed it. It's a short book, it's like 200 pages or something. Not even, but it's very small print, but it's like 170 pages. So to try and explain it, you start off following a character called Corwin, who wakes up in a hospital having had an accident and having no memory of who he is. And for the first part of the book, he's trying to find out who he is, and someone's trying to kill him, he thinks. So he's, it's set, you believe in sort of, well, it's written in the 1960s or 70s, and so it's set in that time period in America, and he's following this trail of clues to find out who he is, and it leads him to a house with a person in it, and he plays along as if he hasn't lost his memory, and then halfway through the book it ends up discovering that actually he's not from Earth as we know it, but they're from a another land called Amber, and that he's one of 9 princes, and there are some princesses, some sisters as well, all vying for power in the land of Amber, and they're immortal and kind of all powerful as well. So it was a strange read to start with, but by the end I was kind of really invested in wanting to know what was going on. It's not fantasy as modern fantasy is written, so I think a lot of modern fantasy readers wouldn't necessarily enjoy it. It's very much of its time, there's a lot of smoking going on. It's very much of its time. I enjoyed it because I like classic fantasy and classic sci-fi, and I'm definitely going to read the next 2, which I've just picked up off of World of Books secondhand, and I just love these old covers. So yeah, I enjoyed it. Don't know if it'd be for everybody, but I enjoyed it. Next up, I read Verity by Colleen Hoover. Colleen Hoover is apparently a really hugely popular best-selling author. I think she's a romance author. I'd never really heard of her before I got onto Bookstagram and BookTube. And I think this is her first thriller. So I might be completely wrong. If there are Colleen Hoover fans out there, I apologise. And it was okay. It was an okay book. I read it in one sitting. The premise is of a writer who's not a hugely best-selling writer, but she just does enough to get by, and she's pretty broke, and she's offered to finish off a series of a best-selling author who's a multi-millionaire who's been involved in a car accident and can't finish this series. And whilst she's in her office going through her notes to try and get the final notes for these few books that she has to finish the series off on, she discovers a manuscript to what appears to be a biography, and a very disturbing one, an autobiography of Verity, who is the author. It's kind of a psychological thriller. So, but there's quite a lot of love scenes thrown in, which I could have done without personally, but I can see why they were there because, but I won't go into it any more than that. That was Verity. It was okay. I don't think it was anything to write home about, but that's just me. I think a lot of people really enjoyed the book, so pick it up and see what you think of it. I was taking part in Pratchett in April on Bookstagram, which was a wonderful event hosted with three other lovely Bookstagrammers who I'll just link their Instagram pages below so you can take a look at it. And it just finished, and we were posting about everything Terry Pratchett this month in April, and just sharing our love and our joy of Discworld and his other books as well, his non-fiction, his children's writing. So I read the amazing Maurice and His Educated Rodents as part of that. It's a Discworld book for children. It was the first one that was published and marketed for children, but I've got a great review of it that I did a few weeks back, which I'll put a card up for you if you want to know more about it. It's up there. I really enjoyed it. It's a Pied Piper of Hamelin retelling basically, and very cleverly done. I also read The Third Door by Alex Banayan. I think I got the recommendation from Ali Abdol's YouTube. He's a great productivity YouTuber, and I'm a big fan of productivity, or I like a business book if it's something that's going to, it doesn't necessarily have to be about applying it to business, but applying things to your life. So it seemed like a really good book, and I listened to the whole thing, and I did listen to it all the way through. However, I didn't really learn anything from it. The reason I listened to it all the way through is because the premise of it is the third door is this idea that all the really successful people in whatever field they're in, and he talks about Bill Gates, Lady Gaga, a boxer, various people from various fields and how they've got to the top of their fields. He said his analogy is that success is like getting into this nightclub, and most people queue up. There's 3 ways in. Most people queue up, and it takes a long time, and you might get in or you might stand outside all night. Then there are the VIPs who are given a pass and get in straight away. And then there's a third way, which he calls the third door, which is where you get in by knowing the right people, or taking risks, or putting yourself out there, or I don't know. That's the premise. I mean, quite honestly, I've read far better books about being successful and lessons you can learn. So Alex Banayan decided to go on this mission to interview as many successful people as possible and learn from them how they became successful, and he was going to put it together in a book. So I thought what I was getting was going to be interviews with all of these people about how they became successful and then lessons learned from it. And it kind of is that, but mostly it's the story of how Alex hunted down and found these people. And my kind of takeaway from it is that he hounded a lot of people, and he had a lot of contacts already that enabled him to, get to people like Bill Gates or Warren Buffett and people like that. So yeah, I don't know. I could see that there are some lessons to be learned from his book, but there are better productivity and business books out there as far as I'm concerned. It kept me listening though, because he's actually a really good storyteller. So I was really invested in finding out whether he did actually get to interview Bill Gates, or whether he did eventually speak to Warren Buffett and this kind of thing. So I was invested in the story part of it. So yeah, kind of like a 3-star read for me, because I actually listened right through to the end. But in terms of what I learned from it, not much. Next up is another review video I did last week for the Gilded ones. I'll put a card up for you. I really enjoyed it. It's a YA, feminist, West African inspired YA story about young girls who are in a patriarchal society, and these girls are different from other people and they're considered to be demons, and normally they're killed, but there's a war going on with some monsters, and the emperor of the country decides to utilise their skills because they can't be killed very easily. They have sometimes superhuman strength. They've all got different powers basically. Yeah, I enjoyed it. It was a really good YA book, better than some I've read recently, but typical of YA in lots of ways, apart from the premise. And I really like the message and the underlying themes of, making, not accepting necessarily everything that you're told, about the sort of anti-patriarchal messages within the book, which I think are really powerful. There is a second book coming out, which I will read, because I found the explanation of where the girls got their powers from and how the kingdom came to be the way it was lacking a bit towards the end. So the end felt a bit rushed, and it also felt that there were some gaps, which I'm going to give it the benefit of the doubt and hope that it's resolved in book 2. But it is a YA book, so it is worth bearing that in mind if you do pick it up and read it. But I was gripped with it. I enjoyed the characters, I enjoyed the relationships. I've got a full review. I'll back a card up and you can take a look at the full review. But look at that cover. I just love it. The next book I read was on people pleasing, and it was by someone called Emma Turrell. Emma Reed Turrell, and it's a book about recognising whether you're a people pleaser and how to overcome it. People pleasing in all sorts of given situations and with different relationships in your life. I found it really excellent because I recognised a lot of things that I do and a lot of behaviours that I've got to change about myself if I want to be a bit happier in life. If you're a people pleaser, generally that means that you're constantly apologising for things. You're constantly saying yes to things because you're afraid of upsetting people or being disliked. And there are various reasons why people do it. It's not just because you don't like to be liked, but some people find it really uncomfortable if everyone around them is arguing, for example. So they don't want to be the cause of that. So when there's a discussion about, I don't know, where to go for dinner and there's a few people with different ideas, the people pleaser will let other people decide. Even if they don't like where they're going, they'll let them decide because they don't want to cause any more hassle. And I really recognise that in myself, and I think it would resonate for a lot of people. So if that sounds like you, I definitely would read the book. It talks about people pleasing in men and in women, because a lot of people think it's a real quite a female trait, but actually it was a really interesting book and I'd highly recommend it. I found it really interesting, and I'm trying to apply some of the rules in my own life at the moment, and I'm recognising a lot about what I do and why I do it. Next up, I read Remains of the Day by Kazuo Ishiguro. I haven't done a review of it because I tend to do longer reviews for children and middle grade and things like that. But I read it because he's one of the authors I've wanted to read for such a long time. It's one of my reading goals for this year was to read books by him, and so I've ticked off the goal. I read at least one book by him, but now that I've read that, I definitely want to read more. He's one of our greatest living British authors. He's British-Japanese author, and he's won the Nobel Prize for Literature. Remains of the Day, I'm desperate to see the film, but my brother has seen the film years ago, and I bought the book for him, and I thought, if he reads the book, we'll watch the film together, and then we can talk about it, which would be great. Can't wait to do that. So if you're watching this, Stephen, make sure you read the book soon, and then we'll get together and watch the film, because I really, really want to watch it. Really, really want to watch it. I feel like I'm going to cry buckets when I watch it as well. But if you're not aware of the story, it's very famous. Anthony Hopkins was in the film with Emma Thompson, and they won Oscars for it. I'm sure. I might be wrong. Someone correct me if I'm wrong. But it's all about Stevens. He's telling his story, and Stevens is a butler in the 1950s in England, and he's taking a holiday because his new employer has gone away to America. His new employer is American. He's bought this stately English home, and this butler's come along with it, and the employer's gone home to America and has said to Stevens, why don't you take a break and take a few days off and drive around the country, because it's beautiful and you should see more of your own country, kind of thing. And as he's driving to go and visit an old colleague, he's reminiscing about his life, and it's about how a life is spent and about a life in service and regrets and all sorts of things. And it's beautiful, it's beautifully written. I think it's the sort of book that I'd like to read again, having read it once now, just to go back and actually really savour some of the writing. It's a 5-star read. It's beautiful, and it's unsurprising really that it was, but I loved it. And it's one of those things that you think about continually after you finish reading it. So if you haven't read it, do give it a go. It's brilliant. I also listened to The Secret Diary of Adrian Mole, age 13 3/4. One of my favourite bookstagrammers, Anna, from @AnnaTheBooksIRead, which I'll link to her bookstagram account in my description box. She's absolutely wonderful. She'd mentioned The Secret Diary of Adrian Mole, and I'd forgotten all about that book, and I remember trying to read it when I was a teenager. So Sue Townsend wrote this series of books about Adrian Mole, starting at the first one, which is when he's 13 3/4, and going right through. I think there was right up until the Blair, like the Labour years under Tony Blair, but it starts off in basically the early 1980s in Thatcher's Britain. It's a really good snapshot of life in the UK at that time. He's a teenager and he's just trying to navigate the choppy landscape of romance and school and family life, and he thinks of himself as somewhat of an intellectual, and it's very, very funny. And he's the things that he's missing out on when he's writing, and he's writing certain observations, and you can read between the lines of what's really going on. So it's very, very, very funny, and actually I can see why I didn't really get it the first time I read it when I was much younger, and I think I appreciate it much more now having listened to it as an adult. I listened to the audiobook. Narrator's voice is a little bit annoying, but it was a really good audiobook. It's the sort of thing that goes really well on audio, actually. So I will listen to the next one, and I'd recommend it. You can get the old TV series on YouTube, and it starred Julie Walters. Really good casting. So I remember it being on TV, and I remember the theme tune. So I'm going to give that a watch, and yeah, hopefully it will live up to the book, which was really good. And the last thing I read, I got a proof copy. Thank you, Chicken House Books, for this amazing proof copy of this lovely, lovely middle grade book. It's a really sweet book called By Ash, Oak and Thorn. I've written a blog post on it and reviewed it on Instagram, and I am going to do a video review of it, get a proper copy of it, I think, so that I can show you the cover. Actually, I'll put a picture up here of the cover. So By Ash, Oak and Thorn is all about 3 tiny guardians of the wild, and they're these tiny little hidden folk, they call themselves, and they're like sort of tiny but ancient guardians of nature. And the book is their journey through the countryside and into the city in search of others of their kind, because they believe they might be the last of their kind, and something's happening to cause one of them to disappear. Sort of one of his hands is going invisible and he's slowly disappearing. So they want to find out what's going on. It's written by an author called Melissa Harrison, who is apparently an award-winning nature writer. And this is her first book for children, and I've got a full review of it on my blog, and I really thought it was very sweet. It's such a lovely book. I got that really nice warm cozy feeling you get when you read something like The Wind in the Willows or something like that. It's just these lovely 3 friends. They're very innocent, going across country and having adventures, and throughout it Melissa Harrison uses the correct terminology and names for all the plants and animals, and I actually learned tons, because clearly my plant knowledge isn't up to scratch, but I learned really amazing things like that. And the settings of the city and the country mean it's really accessible for children wherever they live, and it encourages you to look out for nature wherever you are. So like for instance, did you know that the urban pigeon, because I live in London, millions of them everywhere, the urban pigeon is one of the best flyers in the avian kingdom, because when you think about it, it's constantly having to dodge and dip and swirl out of the way and avoid, dangers constantly. So apparently really good flyer. So all sorts of little interesting facts like that all throughout, and it's not it's done in a really natural way. But I'll do a proper review of it on my channel soon. But I just finished reading it yesterday, and my blog post went up yesterday, so I'll put a link in the description box if you'd like to check that out. So those are the 11 books that I read in April. Those are the changes to my channel. More videos being posted, so that I've got the reviews going up as regularly as I can, rather than it just being a review once a week and then one of these long-winded videos every now and again. And I really want to get into some sort of practice of filming my videos in advance and making sure I've got, I'm timetabling and scheduling myself. If any if any booktubers out there have any advice for me on what they do, I'd love to hear about it. Put it in the comments below. I'm going to review next, I will review By Ash, Oak and Thorn. I think that will be my next video up on Wednesday. So hopefully you enjoyed this video. If you like this, if you like more of these type of things, please comment the kind of things you like watching on BookTube. And hopefully, if you liked it enough, please click like and subscribe, and I'll see you again here soon. Bye.